Imagine this. You're sitting in a bar, perfectly calm, not saying much. A woman walks in, confident, beautiful, used to attention. She scans the room, and when her eyes meet yours, she stops. Not because you said something, not because you flashed a smile, but because of the energy you're radiating, controlled, deliberate, and charged with something she can't quite explain. That tension, that unspoken pull, that's what this video is about. Because the truth is, women aren't attracted just by what you say. They're moved by what you trigger in them. And if you understand the right psychological switches to flip, you don't need to chase, you don't need to beg, you don't even need to impress. You just sit there, and something about you makes them want to come closer, makes them want to chase you. Most guys are stuck in the surface. They focus on looks, pickup lines, texting strategies, and while that might get you noticed, it won't get her obsessed. Because obsession happens in the subconscious. It happens when you bypass logic and speak directly to the primal part of her brain, the part that decides in milliseconds whether you're just another man or the man. And this has nothing to do with manipulation or tricks. This is about understanding female psychology so deeply, so precisely, that you create a magnetic tension she doesn't know how to resist. I'm going to break this down based on some of the most powerful insights from the world of seduction, drawing from masters like Robert Greene, Ross Jeffries, Zan Perrion, and of course Neil Strauss. These men didn't just teach you how to speak, they taught you how to affect. And when you can affect a woman at a psychological level, when you can stimulate her imagination, create mystery, build anticipation, and project deep masculine polarity, you don't have to do much. You just have to be. And how you're being, that's what triggers her emotional chaos in the best possible way. Let's start with something that most men never even think about: the way you create space. When a man walks into a room and instantly starts chasing, asking questions, trying to entertain, trying to get attention, he kills the tension before it even starts. But when you enter a space with composure, grounded presence, and a slight detachment, you immediately flip one of the most powerful triggers in her mind: uncertainty. And here's what's wild: uncertainty is arousing. According to psychological studies, when someone feels unsure about how you feel about them, their brain actually releases more dopamine. That's the same chemical responsible for addiction. So by doing less, by holding back slightly, by not giving her immediate validation, you create a sense of mystery that makes her mind spin. And the female brain? It loves spinning in stories. This is what Robert Greene calls strategic withdrawal. The art of not being completely available, not because you're playing games, but because you're rooted in your own world. You're not acting distant to manipulate her. You're just not giving away access to your attention like it's free. Because it's not. Your attention is your power. And when she realizes she has to work for it, even a little, it triggers something ancient. Something that tells her, this man is high value. But here's the catch. If you just stay distant without offering anything else, she'll lose interest. That's why this trigger must be combined with micro moments of vulnerability. Zan Perrion, a master of seductive presence, often says, "The most seductive men are not the ones who try to impress. They're the ones who show you their depth without fear." A man who can sit with silence, who doesn't need to constantly prove himself, and then out of nowhere drops a subtle, real comment that reveals emotional intelligence. That's lethal, because now she's not just curious, she's hooked. She wants to know more. She wants to understand you. And curiosity, in a woman's mind, leads straight to emotional investment. Another powerful psychological trigger that most men underestimate is contrast. You see, when a man is just one thing, always funny, always serious, always sexual, he becomes predictable. And predictability kills attraction. But when you show a range, when you can be playful and then intense, distant and then warm, mysterious, and then unexpectedly direct, you create emotional whiplash. And this whiplash, when done with awareness, becomes unforgettable. Think of it like music. If every note were the same, the song would be boring. It's the pauses, the rhythm changes, the unexpected chords that make a melody addictive. Your presence should feel the same. Ross Jeffries, one of the earliest seduction pioneers, understood this very well when he taught pattern interruptions. It's the idea that when you do something unexpected, when you break her internal script, you instantly capture her attention. Because our brains are wired to notice novelty. So, imagine this. Everyone else is complimenting her looks, but you look her in the eye and say, "You know, there's something incredibly chaotic behind your calm expression. I wonder what part of you you're hiding." Boom! Pattern interrupted. Now she's not thinking about how she looks. She's thinking about what you see in her that others don't. That's psychological depth. That's intimacy. Let's go deeper. There's a concept in psychology called transference. It's when someone projects past emotional patterns onto a new person. When you understand this, you can deliberately become a container for those projections. What does this mean? It means that if you create the right emotional frame, one where she feels safe, seen, and slightly challenged, she will unconsciously begin transferring deep feelings onto you. She won't even understand why she feels so connected to you so quickly. But it happens, especially when you speak to her not as a stranger trying to seduce her, but as if you've known her soul for years. It's not about pretending. It's about tuning in, being radically present, and speaking into her hidden self, not the mask she shows the world. Women don't want just chemistry. They crave psychological immersion. They want to feel like the interaction is not just happening on the surface, but that it's awakening something dormant inside them. That's why the most powerful seduction doesn't feel like seduction. It feels like connection. But that connection only happens when you understand the architecture of her desire. And that architecture is built on 4 key elements: anticipation, tension, contrast, and unpredictability. If you master those, she'll think about you long after you've left the room. But here's where most guys fail. They think these triggers are lines to memorize or tricks to deploy. No, these are energetic transmissions, meaning if you don't embody the energy behind the trigger, it won't work. You can't fake groundedness. You can't fake mystery. You can't fake masculine calm. Women are intuitive. They feel what you're actually projecting, even if your words sound confident. That's why seduction starts with your internal state. Before you try to turn her on, you need to turn your own energy inward. You need to become so anchored in your presence that every word you say comes from a place of power, not performance. Now let me ask you something and be honest. How often are you speaking to impress versus speaking from depth? How often are you trying to be liked versus being fully in your masculine truth, regardless of her reaction? That's the real test. Because a woman doesn't fall for the version of you that tries to win her over. She falls for the version of you that doesn't need to, and this is just the beginning. What I'm about to show you in the next parts of this video will completely rewire how you see female desire, how you create emotional tension, and how you show up as the man who isn't chasing women because they're too busy chasing him. Let's go even deeper, because once you understand the foundational triggers, you unlock something far more powerful: the ability to shape her emotional landscape without ever forcing a thing. Women don't want control. They want experience. And the man who understands this never tries to make her feel something. He creates the environment where feelings naturally arise. That's the difference between manipulation and influence. One feels cheap. The other feels like a magnetic storm she never saw coming. Now think about this. Have you ever noticed how the most unforgettable interactions happen in moments where nothing was being pushed? Where the silence was thick with energy? Where her eyes lingered a little too long? Where your words slowed down and your body did nothing, but she leaned in anyway? That's not an accident. That's what happens when you master emotional pacing. Most guys are in a rush. They talk fast, touch too soon, ask too many questions. They don't know how to hold space. But when you slow down, not out of laziness, but out of control, you immediately frame yourself as the dominant energy in the room. And dominance, by the way, doesn't mean being aggressive or loud. It means emotional containment. You hold the vibe. You hold her curiosity. You hold your own frame so tightly that she feels it without you saying a word. That's why women respond to leaders, not performers. Leaders create the vibe. Performers chase reactions. Let's talk about framing, because this is a deadly psychological weapon when used right. When you approach a woman with the underlying belief that you are trying to win her, you've already lost. But when you engage with the frame that you're assessing her, feeling her out, inviting her into your world if she's aligned, now the polarity shifts. Now she starts to wonder, what's different about you? Why aren't you trying like the rest? Why do you feel like a man who doesn't need anything from her? This flips the dynamic completely. And once a woman enters your frame, Once she starts reacting to your pace, your emotional tone, your rhythm, now she's not just attracted, she's affected. That's the trigger most men never reach. But when you learn to calibrate your energy, your eye contact, your pauses, your subtle teasing, your control of proximity and space, you become unforgettable without needing to be flashy. And here's something most men completely miss: psychological roleplay. I'm not talking about games or fake personas. I'm talking about activating different archetypes within her mind. Every woman has hidden selves. She's the seductress, the innocent, the rebel, the nurturer, the wild girl, the queen, the man who can make her feel different versions of herself in your presence. That man owns her imagination. That man creates contrast within her own identity. For example, if she's always seen as classy and reserved, and you, without saying it directly, tease out her playful or naughty side, you activate an inner part of her that she rarely expresses. And here's the key. She will associate that awakening with you. She will crave that version of herself, and since you're the one who brought it to life, you become the emotional anchor. That's not seduction, that's imprinting. And when a woman is emotionally imprinted, logic flies out the window. But to do that, you need to develop a strong sense of emotional agility. Meaning, you're able to play with tone. You can switch from playful to dark, from soft to dominant, from spiritual to sensual, without ever losing your core. Because women are emotional creatures. They don't want flat lines. They want movement. They want to feel. And the more emotional dimensions you give her, without overwhelming her, the deeper she falls. Neil Strauss talks about this in The Truth, how most men operate from a narrow emotional range, and how expanding your range, your ability to shift modes without losing masculinity, makes you emotionally fascinating. Think about that. When was the last time you fascinated a woman? Not with your words, not with your appearance, but with the way you made her feel multiple things in one conversation. Let's get even more raw. One of the most explosive psychological triggers is taboo implication. This doesn't mean saying inappropriate things. It means suggesting what's not being said. Women are masters at reading between the lines. So when you imply desire without stating it, when you let your gaze linger a second too long, when your voice drops and your words slow just slightly, when your touch is delayed, then withdrawn, you create a world of erotic tension without ever being explicit. That's high-level seduction, because it gives her permission to fantasize. And fantasy is the realm where obsession is born. Contrast that with the men who say everything too directly. You're sexy. I want you. Let's do something. That's low-level, predictable, and often makes her feel like she's just a target. But when she feels your desire underneath your control, when she knows you're holding back something dark and raw and powerful, that's when her imagination ignites. And once she starts fantasizing about you, it's game over. Another rarely discussed but insanely powerful trigger is shared isolation. Let me explain. If you can create a vibe where it feels like the two of you are the only people in the world, even if you're in a crowded place, she'll start to experience emotional intimacy without realizing it. How do you do that? By controlling your focus. When she speaks, really listen. Not just to what she's saying, but how she says it, what's beneath it, what her eyes are doing, where her energy shifts. Then respond in a way that makes her feel like you see something others miss. This makes the interaction feel exclusive. And exclusivity is a turn-on, because now, in her mind, you've created a bubble, a shared secret world. And anything that happens in that world feels more intense, more personal, more addictive. It's not about isolating her physically. It's about creating psychological isolation, where your attention is so sharp, so present, so unshakable that she feels enveloped by it. And finally, let's touch on one of the deepest triggers of all, emotional risk. A woman will never fully surrender to a man she doesn't feel emotionally safe with. But safety doesn't mean being soft. It means she knows you're grounded enough to handle her emotions, her contradictions, her chaos. The moment she senses that your confidence isn't reactive, that you don't flinch when she tests you, that you don't chase when she pulls away, that you don't crumble under pressure, her feminine instinct kicks in, and it whispers, "This man can lead. This man can hold me." That, my friend, is when she opens. That's when she lets go. Because all of the triggers we've talked about, uncertainty, mystery, anticipation, contrast, psychological roleplay, they all rely on one thing: your inner state. If your inner world is solid, your outer presence becomes irresistible. And this isn't about acting, it's about becoming. You become the man who naturally triggers these responses, not because you're trying, but because you've built yourself from the inside out. And when she feels that, she won't know why she's craving you, she just will. There's a moment, and it happens in every truly magnetic interaction, when the woman pauses. She tilts her head just slightly, her pupils dilate, her body language shifts almost imperceptibly, and she starts reacting, not just to your words, not even just to your presence, but to something deeper, to the signal underneath the surface. That signal is invisible. You can't fake it. But once you learn to master it, you'll never be forgotten, and that signal is your energetic intent. Let me explain what that means. Most men operate from a place of need. They try to hide it, but it leaks through their words, their body language, their timing. You can smell it. But when your intent isn't about getting something, and instead it's about offering an experience, inviting her into your world without needing her to say yes, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is one of the most emotionally intoxicating forces for the feminine mind. Because the truth is, women are tired of predictable men. They're tired of guys who make their attraction so obvious that there's no suspense left. What truly drives a woman crazy, in the best way, is the man who makes her feel without trying. The man who knows his value so deeply, he doesn't sell it, he doesn't explain it, he radiates it. And that radiation, subtle, slow, powerful, is a form of silent seduction that penetrates straight into her subconscious. You want to know one of the rarest psychological triggers a woman can feel from a man? Emotional discretion, not coldness, not distance, discretion. The sense that you're not the kind of man who spills his thoughts to just anyone. That you don't open up unless there's true depth, that your approval is earned, not given. This creates a dynamic where she wants to be the exception. And once she wants to be the exception, she begins to invest. That's the moment everything changes. Now you're not chasing her. She's chasing the version of herself that only you can unlock. She starts trying to impress you, trying to prove her emotional depth, trying to keep your attention, even if she doesn't fully understand why. That's the power of being selective without arrogance, of communicating wordlessly, I see you, but I don't need you. One of the most seductive emotional frames you can master is what I call dangerous calm. It's the quiet confidence of a man who is fully in control of himself, but with just enough edge that you feel something wild underneath. Women pick up on this immediately. It's not about being a bad boy, in the cliché sense. It's about owning your shadow without being ruled by it. The kind of man who could break rules, but doesn't have to. That ambiguity, that subtle suggestion of danger under control, it drives women wild. Because it plays directly into the feminine need for security and excitement. When a woman feels both safe and slightly off balance in your presence, she will crave more. And she won't even know why. This is where Carl Jung's concept of the anima and animus becomes fascinating. Every man has an inner feminine. Every woman has an inner masculine. And when your masculine presence is fully embodied, you activate her anima, the part of her psyche that longs for union with something larger, stronger, deeper. That's why real seduction isn't about words or strategies. It's about archetypal energy. When you carry yourself like a man who is sovereign, meaning emotionally independent, self-sourced, non-reactive, you become a living symbol of the masculine ideal her unconscious has been searching for. That's what creates obsession. Not because you said the right line, but because you match an internal blueprint she didn't even know she had. And when you reflect that back to her, when you challenge her, surprise her, hold her accountable, flirt with her mind, she feels like she's met someone mythic. Not a boy, not a player, a man. And very few women forget the moment they encounter that. Let's switch gears. Have you ever heard of the Zeigarnik effect? It's a psychological principle that explains how the brain tends to remember unfinished tasks more than completed ones. You can use this in seduction, when you create emotional open loops, questions you don't fully answer, glances you leave unexplained, moments of connection that you pull back from. You implant yourself in her mind. She starts thinking about you in the spaces between contact. She wonders what you meant. She replays what you said. She starts constructing a fantasy version of you in her head. And here's the key. Fantasy always beats reality. The man who becomes a story in her mind has already won. Most guys try to impress in the moment. But the most powerful seducers think after the moment. They know that real desire builds in absence, in the space after a glance, after a conversation, after a text, so they don't flood her with attention. They don't chase. They drop breadcrumbs. They leave traces. They trust that tension does its work in silence. That's mastery. Now let's go somewhere even more primal. One of the deepest psychological triggers in women is witnessing. I don't mean validation, I mean being seen, truly seen. Most men don't look beyond the mask. But when you slow down enough to notice what she's not saying, when you reflect back a part of her she usually hides, you hit something sacred. Because women live in a world of performance, of being looked at but rarely seen. And when you see her emotional core, without judgment, without agenda, you become the exception. But here's the paradox. The moment she feels completely seen, she also feels exposed. That's where you must apply pressure, not through force, but through stillness. You hold that gaze a little longer. You don't flinch when her voice trembles. You don't rush to reassure her. You let her be witnessed. That act alone creates a depth of intimacy that most men never reach. And once she's felt that with you, everything else will feel shallow by comparison. We also have to talk about self-authority, because one of the most neglected triggers in modern seduction is a man who is his own compass. When a woman sees that you don't bend for validation, that you don't explain yourself, that you know what you want and move towards it unapologetically, her resistance starts to dissolve. Because now she's not dealing with a boy looking for approval. She's dealing with a man grounded in his own path. And that's rare. A man with self-authority doesn't need to be the loudest. He doesn't have to debate. His certainty is quiet, but it's felt. And when you combine that with a warm presence, when you're both powerful and emotionally attuned, you create something women rarely find: safe dominance. The kind of dominance that doesn't need to prove itself. That invites her feminine out. That gives her permission to soften. You see, seduction at this level is not about escalation. It's about invocation. You don't get a woman. You call something forth from her. You awaken the parts of her that are tired of sleeping. And that's only possible when you've awakened those parts in yourself. And this is where it all comes together. Everything I've shared with you isn't just a list of techniques to impress a woman. It's a blueprint to become the kind of man who doesn't have to impress. A man who doesn't chase, doesn't prove, doesn't convince, because everything about his presence already radiates power, intention, and mystery. Every word you speak, every pause you take, every glance you hold, it becomes a subtle provocation that touches her mind, her emotions, her body, without ever being obvious. Never forget this. Women don't fall for what they see. They fall for what they feel. And what they feel isn't determined by your looks, your bank account, or how many lines you've memorized. It's determined by the quality of man you are when you're not trying to win. It's the man who can hold his desire without rushing. The man who's so comfortable in his shadow that his stillness feels dangerous and irresistible. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's this. Stop obsessing over how to get her and start focusing on how to become the man she can't stop thinking about. The man with depth, with fire under control, with direction. The man who doesn't just create desire, but leaves it vibrating in her emotional memory long after he's gone. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift in your perspective, in your energy, in your vision of who you could become, then I want you to do one thing. Interact with this content, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and let me know what part hit you the hardest. Because this isn't just a channel, this is a movement. And every time you engage, you help us reach more men who are ready to rise above the noise and operate on a level that most people don't even know exists. Subscribe, because what's coming next is going to take you even deeper. Here we don't repeat recycled advice. Here we turn men into forces of nature, the kind of men women don't just want, but can't forget. I'll see you in the next video. Stay sharp, stay dangerous, and never forget, real desire begins where your inner mastery starts.